sales, you're going to get hit with objections. This next objection right here is something you want to pay a really close attention to because it can be a little tricky when it comes to this objection, but guess what? You're going to get hit with it. Before we move forward, be sure to subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell so that you're alerted to any new videos that come out about these types of objections that you might run into. So let's talk about this objection. My spouse helps me with all this. If you're in sales long enough, you're going to hear this objection. You've got to be prepared to understand the reason behind it as well as how to actually respond to this. Because this is a tricky one because this could be a blow-off objection, a blow-off resistance stall, or it could be a real one where the spouse actually helps them with all this. In my household, I handle all the health insurance side of it. Other things in my household I don't do anything with, but as far as health insurance goes, that's on me. So if you were talking to my wife about health insurance, she would tell you, my spouse helps me with all of this, okay? So in that instance, that would be a real objection to me continuing the phone call. But again, you have to approach every single phone call. Even if you're calling someone like my wife, you have to find out whether this is really a blow-off or it's actually a true objection. So let's go over this right now. My spouse helps me with all this. Okay, so now here's how we differentiate why the person is doing this, whether it's a objection, a real objection, or if it's a blow-off because they don't want to talk to you anymore. So here's how you respond to, my spouse helps me with all of this. So first of all, you want to go ahead and agree. Remember, always agree, use their first name, then talk about and address the facts, and then go right into your question. So here we go. Let's say that you were going ahead and you were talking to my spouse, and at the end of the day, they say, hey, my spouse helps me with all this. So here's how I would respond. That's fantastic, Jennifer. I wish my spouse took care of all of our insurance needs. Let me ask you a question. If you could narrow down to one thing that you would change about your current insurance, what would it be? See, what I've done right now is I'm trying to go ahead and move this conversation forward and find out if this is really an objection, a true objection, or if they're trying to blow me off. Because if you're talking to somebody that really their spouse helps them with all this, they're going to come back and say, hey, wait a minute, I don't deal with our insurance at all. My spouse helps me with this. You're going to have to call me back at a separate time because I don't know anything about our insurance at all. Now you've realized that this is really a true objection. This is not just somebody trying to blow you off. So again, if they start answering this question for you, now all of a sudden you realize that maybe, just maybe, they were trying to blow you off, but you've come around in a different way and you've asked a question that now is eliciting a response back to you, and now all of a sudden you're getting them to talk and you're trying to find out if really this was an objection or if they were really trying to just blow you off. So let's go ahead and let's go back over this. My spouse helps me with all this. So how do you respond back to that? That is fantastic, Jennifer. I wish my spouse took care of all of our insurance needs. Let me ask you a question. If you could narrow down to one thing, what would you change about your current insurance? Just trying to move the conversation forward, getting them to talk, and you'll be surprised that you'll find out that most of the time this is actually just a blow-off question. How do I know that? Because I've used that, you've gone ahead and you've deflected off to a spouse for their decision when really you were the decision maker, you just didn't want to talk about it. Now all of a sudden, if I had gone ahead and given you that objection, now all of a sudden it's eliciting a response back for the insurance to kind of narrow it down to one thing that I would change about the current insurance. So if I keep talking about it, guess what? I am actually the decision maker. But let's say that the stall continues. Let's talk about the stall behind the stall. What about if that person comes back and they say, you know what? You're going to have to talk to my spouse because my spouse really handles all this. I appreciate it, but they're the ones that you need to talk to, okay? Again, you don't want to just hang up the phone because this could still be a blow-off to you. You have to really understand if this is really, truly an objection. So if that stall continues, here's how you respond back to it if they do that to you. I hear you, Jennifer. It sounds like you're a lot like me and want to make sure that you're making the right decision. What types of questions do you think that your spouse will have? Boom! Now all of a sudden, I am now putting it back in their court to find out if this was really an objection. If they come back and say, you know what, I don't know what questions they'll have for you because I don't deal with it, they deal with that. Now all of a sudden you've realized that really that was not the decision maker. You've got to move forward. But you know what? You'll be surprised that coming back with this type of response back from the stall, behind the stall, you'll be surprised to see if really that was truly an objection. So again, if they come back and say, you know what, you're going to have to talk to my spouse about it. They handle that. I'm going to come back and say, I hear you, Jennifer. It sounds like you're a lot like me and you want to make sure that you're making the right decision. What types of questions do you think your spouse is going to have? Now all of a sudden, if they start answering that question, wait a minute, they might be the decision maker, and now all of a sudden they're starting to answer that question, and now all of a sudden you've moved that conversation forward to gather more information to qualify to make sure if really that was the person that you should have been talking to all along. So now that you understand how to respond back to this objection, you have to talk to my spouse. My spouse helps me with all this. You now know that right away what you're going to do is you're going to say, that's fantastic, Jennifer. I wish my spouse took care of all of our insurance needs. Let me ask you a question. If you can narrow it down to one thing, what would you change about your current insurance, getting them to talk more to move that conversation forward? If they still come back and say, hey, you're going to have to talk to my spouse, they handle all of it. Now you know how to respond to that by saying, hey, I hear you, Jennifer. It sounds like you're a lot like me and you want to make sure that you're making the right decision. What types of questions do you think that your spouse will have? Now you're armed with the first response back to that objection, and now you have also a response back to the stall behind the stall, so that now you are better prepared each time that objection comes back to you. So guess what? Now that you have all that, next time that you face this objection or this resistance, you now have everything you need at your disposal to be an absolute sales rock star. Go out there today and be a sales rock star to your customers.